know, a lot of folks know that Bruce and I run a group on Facebook where we try to help people with their sewing machines and their sewing machine problems, help them diagnose, and then ultimately get their machine operating again so that they can get back to work, right?
Yeah.
So inevitably, what happens is somebody will come into the group and say, "Hey, you know what? My machine did this, and it went kabow, and then like, now what?" And we always refer them to the pinned post and say, "Hey, you got to format the question in a way that we can, help you, because if we don't know which machine it was, I mean, kind of helps if we know what machine, and then the the things leading up to the problem, and then ultimately what the machine is doing at the time. Because if you just say, you know what, my machine went bang and now the string broke, well, first of all, we don't use string, we use thread. And then the machine going bang, what does that really mean? So we're left up to, trying to figure it out or interpret what is actually being said, right? So it's really helpful if people can actually format it in a way where, hey guys, check it out. I'm running a Cobra Class 26. I've got a 25 needle and I'm using 69 thread through 9 ounces of veg tan that's been dyed and then lacquered and then made into corbellet. And for some reason, it's just not working. And I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do.
That's if we get that much information.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
but we get a lot.
Sometimes we get a picture and somebody will say, what's going on here? What's the problem? And it's like, well, I see 4 or 5 problems. Which
Exactly.
one are you referring to?
So, but we want to be helpful, and we like to be polite most of the time.
Right.
And but if you tie our hands, we can't help you. So it's a very common thing. So the more information you can give us in the most concise way, the better things are. And then there's the issue of, can you please call me? So I give you my personal phone number, or Bruce will give you his personal phone number, and then we're waiting and waiting and waiting. But we know you made the post 2 minutes ago, and a half an hour goes by and still nothing. So if we ask you to call, just call right away so that we can get to it.
Or
Okay?
let us know you're not going to call.
Yeah, if you can't call, but here we are watching a bunch of responses happening in the post, then I want to help you, but you can't help those who won't help themselves. So there's that little thing. But at the same time, when you do call me, I'd like it if you had a pen and a piece of paper. But I'd like it even more if you had your logbook. And people, what's he mean by a logbook? And the logbook, in my perspective, is a pretty cool thing because it's like a dear diary of your sewing machine. You just kind of talk into your sewing machine. Whatever comes into your mind about your sewing machine, you write it down. But I like to suggest that people target around what I call the home position. See the magic air quotes, home position. And that is the condition that the machine lives in all the time. For example, my class 4, 346 bonded nylon top and bottom, a 25 needle or a 24, depending on the density of the leather. And stitch length is about 7 per inch with the presser foot pressure cranked all the way down. And you might think to yourself, why would you do that? Well, the leathers that I sew typically don't mar, they don't leave marks in there. So it doesn't really matter. But now that's my home position. And if I need to change it to, let's say, 207 and a 23 needle, then I'll put it in the logbook and remember that I adjusted the tension this much and I adjusted the presser foot pressure this much and put the other needle in. So then that way I have a roadmap to get back home. And typically that works. After a while, you kind of build up a intuition for it. But at the beginning, write it all down. And then after a year or two, you've got all this information. And then you know what happens with that book 50 years from now? It's been living with the sewing machine forever, and your great grandkids get to see all your notes. So it's kind of cool. It becomes an heirloom at the same time. And depending on how much information you put in it, you might have pictures and complaints, or you might be able to see something that your great grandma wrote down or whatever. So I think it's a kind of a neat thing, but it's
Well,
up to you.
it also helps if you're using different types of leather and you need to make adjustments. And, well, 6 months ago, I used this stuff. What did I do? Well, I go in my logbook and I look it up. And I say, oh, I had to use this needle and this thread and these settings to do that. So I don't
And
have
then
to sit
it's
there
just a
and
matter
play
of
it.
then it's just a matter of a simple adjustment, and you're right in there,
Yeah,
real
it's
productive and
yeah.
easy.
There's no taking scrap and playing around and a little more tension, a little less tension, a little more pressure, a little less pressure feet. I know because I looked in the book. I said, oh, okay. So right now I'm set up for a quarter inch thick of veg tan, and now I want to sew some chrome tan. And I used it, like I said, I used this 6 months ago. What did I do? Oh, smaller needle, you know, little more pressure on the presser feet, whatever. Had to tighten the bobbin or loosen the bobbin.
And it just makes everything just that little bit easier.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just some food for thought. We just suggest that you do it. If you don't want to, whatever. Okay. So let's get back to the original reason we're here, Bruce. So we had a topic idea that we wanted to toss around. Do you remember what that was, Bruce?
Interpreting what people, what should people put in their post?
Well, I thought we went one level deeper than that, and was going to be how we diagnose sewing machine problems in the group, okay, and then in real life. So the difference between the two, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead. You guide this one.
Well, in the group, so you put in your post and we interpret what we think you're trying to say. And if we can't, we start asking questions. So, what size needle, what size thread, how thick is your leather, what kind of leather is it? What happened before this problem occurred? Did you break a needle? Did you have a thread jam? Whatever. Did you change something? And as we start to build a story.
Right. So we get the story out of you, or you volunteer the story. But the thing is, what ends up happening sometimes is people misinterpret our intent, and they get kind of defensive, or they feel like they can't explain or whatever. So kind of, if it starts getting really long, that's when I suggest people call me. Yeah. It's just so that we can save each other's time. And then ultimately, when the issue is resolved or not, the audience, the group as a collective, needs to kind of understand what happened. So we ask that somebody, typically you, the recipient of the information, go back in and summarize so that everybody else can learn at the same time. Right? So I find myself telling the same story all the time. And that is, folks have to kind of visualize the way the machine works. Okay. Right. And it's really funny that a lot of people don't really get it. Right. So I tell them, I ask them to close their eyes and just imagine the machine from the inside out. And then I tell them, okay, can you imagine the hand wheel? Can you see it in your mind? Okay, there it is. It's spinning. Right. And then that energy of the hand wheel spinning transfers down the main shaft over to the needle bar. So it's going around and around and around. The needle bar starts going up and down. But with the Cobra class machines, there's an additional complexity in that not only does the needle bar go up and down, but the feed or the presser feet have to go up and down, and the inner foot or outer foot, depending on the machine, has to walk as well. Okay, so the inertial force out of the hand wheel goes across a shaft and translates to vertical motion, and then a pendulum motion also with the presser feet. So people start going, oh, wow, I get it. I get it. They start visualizing, and they start getting a little more intuition into what's mechanically happening in the machine. And then the same thing about the bobbin or the hook and the feed dog. So now there's the hand wheel, and it goes down the main section of the machine and across the bobbin or across the bottom, and then starts spinning the bobbin over here. So the hand wheel's going like this and the bobbin's doing that. Remember how you used to try to pat your head and rub
But the bob, here's an important point though, is that the bobbin doesn't spin on its own.
No, you're absolutely right.
There's
It's
nothing mechanically connected to the bobbin in the machine that makes the bobbin spin. It just sits there. And
right.
It waits for something to pull on its thread.
And there you go. And while all that's happening, the feed dog is moving
back and forth.
Well, it's got its weird little pattern.
Yeah,
it's kind of
it moves
up and
it moves back, it moves down, it moves forward, it moves up, and in synchronization with the walking foot.
Right. Okay. So then the energy is coming from the hand wheel and down a bunch of linkage and turning into hook rotation or feed dog movement, right?
Yeah.
So why is this important? Right? That's kind of, we start thinking, why is it important? Because it all kind of has to happen so that the machine can be in quote time. Right? The needle has to line up with the point of the hook at a very specific moment. We call that the timing moment, right? So if the needle's in position, but the hook is really late, then the needle will get out of position. The hook will come by, can't tie the knot.
Right.
Or the other way around, if the needle's really early and the hook hits it prematurely because it's not in position, then now you're damaging the hook. So you kind of have to understand a little bit about how the forces are in play. But then there's that third layer of timing where the needle and the feed dog and the presser feet have to come together at that one moment. Okay, so that way everything's working, because if the needle and hook are coming together at the right time, but the feed dog is moving everything during that time, then it's going to flex the needle or whatever and break things. So we have an inspection procedure that we tend to do. And in the battlefield, like over text and stuff, we have to be able to determine where the machine is potentially out of time and then ask the reader to inspect that timing inspection so that we can give them the right advice. Do we adjust the needle bar? Do we adjust the hook timing? Or is it the presser foot timing? So in a nutshell, there's three places where the machine times, where it matters most. And we have to figure out which position is out so that we can give the simple solution. You just have to rotate the hook or raise or lower the needle into position or adjust the presser feet. So those are all pretty simple things once you understand it. Go ahead, Bruce.
Or the feed dog.
Or the feed dog, right. But the presser feet and feed dog kind of all operate in the same mechanical environment. So we go back to the story. The initial post says, I started sewing and all the thread got jammed up in the bobbin compartment. So I had to reach in there with my knife and cut it all out. And then I pulled out all this thread. We typically call that a bird's nest. And now it won't pick up the thread anymore. I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end. Well, that implies that all that thread got wound up and the hook that was trying to spin stopped. And now all that inertial force that stopped the hook is now going toward the hand wheel and up to the hand wheel. So the hook is probably shifted on its shaft, and now the hook is out of time. But then if you're not thinking like we try to, then all of a sudden somebody's trying to adjust the needle bar
Yes.
And now the needle and the hook are out of position with the feed dog and the presser feed. Shucks, misdiagnosis, adding more complexity to the original problem. And that's kind of why we tell people not, or we not tell them, we ask them not to guess. Oh, your needle bar is out of position. Well, if you don't know for sure and you misinterpret something and you ask somebody to adjust the needle bar, when in all reality it was the hook mechanism, now you've got two problems with the same machine, and now the end user has more problems to deal with.
And it makes it harder
So
for us to get them back in shape.
absolutely.
Because now we have to figure out, okay, oh, you adjusted your needle bar. Okay. Now we have to go through a process of readjusting the needle bar before you can adjust the, or is it the other way around? You adjust the hook and then you got to adjust the needle bar back.
Whichever it is,
Yeah.
it inevitably adds another layer of complexity. So again, please don't guess, right? That's kind of really the bottom line here. So the diagnostic procedure is about listening to the original poster and figuring out how they fouled the system. So here's another scenario, okay? I was sewing along and suddenly the needle broke. And then when I looked at it, there was a hole in the top of the rivet that was right there. I don't know. I didn't realize these machines were that strong. There's a hole in the top of the rivet, but the needle's broken. And I put a new needle in, and now it's not picking up the string.
Thread.
Now, again, we don't use string, we use thread. And we avoid sewing through rivets. But again, go back to the initial idea of there's the hand wheel spinning, the shaft going across the top, called the main shaft, is sending rotational force to the needle bar, and now you hit the rivet and the needle stops and breaks, and now that force is going up and toward the hand wheel, so it's very likely that the needle bar has been pushed out of position. Would you say that that's a safe assumption there?
Yes.
Okay, so now the procedure for adjusting the needle bar, it's fairly easy, but now we have a clear idea of how to move forward with repairing the machine. Okay, so then scenario number 3. I just bought this machine. The guy told me that it worked great. I brought it home. It won't pick up the thread. I have no idea what's wrong with this. I don't know any history of it. So now we have to diagnose where the machine is potentially out of time. So number 1, do we have the correct needle? Is the needle seated correctly? Because that's a really simple but important thing to know. And then, is the needle bar in time with the feed system? Because that's a really simple inspection. Typically, the feed dog comes up and meets the throat plate surface, the top of the throat plate. So when the feed dog and the throat plate meet, the tip of the needle should be just about to enter, or just barely inside the tip of the opening of the feed dog. And then at that exact moment, both inner and outer foot need to be in contact with the throat. So it's pretty easy. You just cycle the machine until the needle comes to the surface of the throat plate. If the feed dog is there, then cool. But if one of the feet is still up and the other one's down, then a little bit more cycle, then there they are. But the needle is really deep, or the other way around, the needle is really high and both feet are finally touching, then you can suspect the needle bar is out of position. So it's a simple battlefield inspection that gives us enough information to where we can decide whether we're adjusting the needle bar or the hook, right? So it makes it easier for us to determine how to help you, but also it gives hopefully this explanation gives you some intuition as to how the machine operates and how we look at the problem that you're presenting so that we can help you. right? So let's summarize. You think we're at a point where we can summarize, Bruce?
Sure.
Okay, so the machine basically times in three positions, three main category positions: needle hook timing, okay, feed system timing, those two, okay, and then how they correlate to each other, and then how we have to look at it. So, did the system get interrupted in the hook cycle, traveling inertial energy back to the hand wheel, or did it get interrupted in the needle bar cycle and then jam that energy back toward the hand wheel, and then the corrective procedures? So if you fouled the hook with a bunch of thread that stopped the machine, the hand wheel wouldn't turn anymore, and you had to cut out a bunch of thread, then it's very likely that the hook is out of position. So we position the hand wheel and the needle bar into the timing moment. Once the needle bar is in the timing moment, we can inspect, and after fouling the hook, that the hook won't arrive yet. It's behind schedule. So then we just simply adjust the position of the hook, get it back in place where it belongs in the timing moment. And usually it's pretty easy. It's 5 minutes later, you're done. Now, the opposite scenario where I was sewing along and I hit the rivet and broke the needle, and it's very likely that that needle bar is pushed up. So we cycle to the timing moment then, and we see that the needle bar is behind schedule, but the hook is properly positioned. So then we adjust the needle bar back into its proper position. And again, it's usually about 5 minutes, pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And once the operator knows how that works inside their head, they've gotten that intuition or that insight into the system, at that point, they've surpassed the learning curve and they don't need us anymore, which is ultimately the goal, right? We want to teach people to be self-reliant, self-efficient, and be able to be productive with their investment. We respect the fact that they've made this pretty substantial investment into their craft or their trade, and we want to help them stay productive like that. So, anyway, do you think we covered all the bases there, Bruce?
I hope so.
So what inevitably is going to happen is I'm going to get this footage, I'm going to edit it, and I'm probably going to put some insert shots so you can kind of see some stuff. But you know, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is Al Bain for Leather and Bruce Brand, man, myth, legend. We're going to sign off, hoping everybody's having a good day. Hope you found this information easy enough to understand. And we only ask one thing:
Pay it forward.
please pay it forward. All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Later.